the free agents. So I've got 3 quarterbacks here that I think are almost impossible to rank for dynasty purposes right now. They're guys that you could make a wager on and try to trade a second-round pick in your super flex league, and maybe they sign a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal, and all of a sudden you've got a starting quarterback that always costs a first. There are also guys that, like, by the middle of next year, we may just be done with as starters. They are Sam Darnold, who finished last year as QB9 per game, but he put the big old gigantic asterisk next to it because he had a fantastic offense, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And then there's the 2 guys who shared the job in Pittsburgh last year, Justin Fields, who we all like more in fantasy than we do in real life, and Russell Wilson, who everybody seems to hate more than what his actual end of year fantasy points per game ends up being. He was a mid QB2 last year. He was a borderline QB1 the year before. Just at the very top, order of preference today for rostering one of these three quarterbacks, how would you rank them?
Definitely Darnold for me. I just checked KTC. They have Darnold at QB 25 in perceived consensus value right now. Which when I saw that, I was like, I think I would be a little bit higher than that. But then the guys immediately behind him are Anthony Richardson and Jackson Dart, who I would rather have both of them. Justin Fields is next among these guys that we've looked at and we're talking about here. He's QB 28. Derek Carr, QB 33. Russell Wilson, QB 34. I think that's about right.
So I don't have the rookies in my rankings yet. You mentioned Jackson Dart, so I know the rookies are in those rankings. And I have Anthony Richardson quite a bit higher than that. But I've got Darnold at QB 22. I've got Fields at QB 25. I've got Wilson at QB 27. It seems to me that it's way more likely that Sam Darnold and Russell Wilson are going to start a majority of next season than Justin Fields. Do you think that's wrong?
I do think that is right. Like, that's my read on it too. Like, with Fields, I was trying to imagine what would be best for him, and I think it would be staying in Pittsburgh or maybe like going to Indianapolis. And if the Richardson thing doesn't work out there, then they plug him in.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of surprised to see him this high in KTC's rankings. I guess it's just because he does bring the rushing upside. You know what I mean? So there's such a disconnect between like real life and fantasy there. But yeah, it does feel like the NFL mostly does not view him as a starting QB at this point.
Right. And so I think the way I don't put together separate lists of rankings for one QB and super flex leagues, even though I know, well, everybody that's starting a new league right now seems to be starting a super flex league. I think there are still actually more one QB leagues out there than there are super flex. And so I just try to kind of blend them. In a 1 quarterback league, I think Fields would be my favorite because floor doesn't really matter.
Sure.
In a super flex league, Fields is definitely third and probably a distant third because I think it's much more likely that either Darnold or Wilson can be a QB2. I have pretty serious concerns. Like, I feel like we know what Russell Wilson is now. He's a QB2. And any coach that brings Russell Wilson knows what, if the Steelers bring him back, they know what he is. They know how to use him. That's what he's going to be. Sam Darnold is like the same wild card amount of Fields, except without quite the same upside due to the rushing. I don't have a great deal of confidence that if Darnold goes really anywhere else, he's going to be any good at all next year.
What if he went to the Rams? I don't feel like anybody talks about that because Aaron Rodgers is like the Rams guy right now, but I feel like it could make sense to keep him like in the Shanahan tree, you know, going from Shanahan to KOC and then to McVay. I think that would be a good fit for him. Like, I just haven't heard anything about it really.
I've heard absolutely nothing about it. And I think I would definitely feel more confident in Darnold not being terrible if he went to McVay. I'm afraid he's going to go get the most money with the dumbest team, and things are going to just completely fall apart. We did have a question from the chat. He's not a free agent. We talked about the 49ers wide receivers. Mike says, I'm curious if a long-term deal for Brock Purdy will bump him up in the rankings at all, or if that's already baked into his price a little. And Mike, I want to tell you, you were asking the wrong guy. I am already the high guy on Brock Purdy in Dynasty. I think he is probably my favorite quarterback buy at cost. Jacob's going to tell me if I'm right or not. I'm assuming you're going to tell me that he's somewhere around QB 16 or 17 in the rankings you're looking at.
They have him at QB 14, and the only guy that I would definitely take him ahead of is Kyler Murray. Would you rather have him than Jordan Love or Bo Nix or Caleb Williams or CJ Stroud?
I have him ahead of Love. I have him ahead of Nix. I have him ahead of Stroud. I have Caleb ahead of Purdy.
Wow. Okay.
But again, that could change depending on who the 49ers deal. And I think the point does stand. The fact that he's not, like, the extension does give him a little more safety. There's always going to be more doubts. Maybe not always. Maybe after he gets the contract, we stop having these doubts because of his draft pedigree. But I mostly think that, like, last year was a bit of a down year compared to the years before. But still, if you look at just Brock Purdy's passing efficiency last year, it's still absolutely insane. His 8.5 yards per attempt last year. He's now thrown 1,069 passes in the NFL, and he's averaged 8.9 yards per pass attempt. That, sure, it's not all Brock Purdy. Some of it's Kyle Shanahan. He's getting ready to sign a long-term deal to stay with Kyle Shanahan. I think you can expect he's going to be amongst the league leaders in that statistic, which means that he can throw 450, 500 passes and throw for the same number of yards as someone who throws 500, 525.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is he has a career 6% passing touchdown rating. Like, that's, again, just insane. That's Patrick Mahomes territory. And so if he's going to be that efficient on the lower volume, I mostly just expect that that's going to continue, and he's going to be one of the surefire low-end QB1s year in and year out, still just 25 years old. So, again, if you want to trust my rankings, just go buy Brock Purdy right now, because I do think he is one of the cheaper QB1s available.